Could you just tell our audience at inflation.us a little about GATA?
Well, we were formed in January of 1999 by Chris Powell, the editor of a daily newspaper in Connecticut, and myself to expose the manipulation and gold price suppression scheme of a bunch of billion banks, J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs at the time, well, they fled, and Deutsche Bank. And as time went by, we realized that there was more to it, in the fact that the Fed, the Treasury, the Bank of England were all involved, and it was a joint operation. And we've been at it for 12 years, and quite frankly, the stuff that we've learned over that time, it all hangs together and gets more strong as we mature.
Now, for people who don't trade commodity futures, who aren't familiar with this type of stuff, how exactly do banks manipulate precious metals?
Well, it's a bit complicated for what we can go into here, but let's just say, for example, the government, for example, will all of a sudden flood the market with gold, which adds to the supply and forces down the price. And then in concerted action, J.P. Morgan, for example, and we testified this in front of the CFTC, will signal other traders and just start bombing the silver market, and or just overwhelm the speculative longs or traders that think the market's going to go up. And if they create a panic in the market, and people are forced out because they're afraid of losing all their money. And this has been going on since mid-'90s, and especially since we got involved in 1999.
Now, do the banks do this with other commodities, or do they do it with sugar and copper?
Well, I'm not saying it's never done, but I can only speak about what we know, and this is the reason for it. I mean, everyone used to hear about Robert Rubin all the time talking about the strong dollar policy. Well, the strong dollar policy was to keep our interest rates lower than they would be, affect the dollar, our financial markets, and so on. Whatever happens, whenever the gold price screams, especially in your world, and we're talking about inflation, that's what people scream about, inflation or the crisis. It's bad for Wall Street. It's bad for Washington. It's bad for the establishment business. So it's in their interest, they feel, to keep the gold price suppressed as much as possible. Now, of course, to do that, since silver is money too, like gold is, they had to bring silver into the equation, because otherwise it would have been too much of an anomaly. And that's what our 12 years of evidence all show. The good news is, and we can get into it, this price suppression scheme is falling apart.
Yeah, so that's a great question. How much longer do you think they can keep this up?
Well, here's a good one, again, for your listeners. When you talk about inflation, people say, gold stinks. It would be $2,500 an ounce if it kept pace with inflation. And we raise our hands and say, yes, and we'll tell you why. And then, of course, we go into the GATA story. And the other thing we can say is, people say, gold's been in a 10-year bull market. How can you say it's a price suppression scheme when this goes up 10 years in a row? It's very simple. It's all they're doing is they're managing their retreat. The central banks used to have 30,000 tons of gold reserves. Now they have well less than 15,000 tons. In other words, they've run out of ammunition to meet a surging supply-demand deficit. They're hitting the wall, and especially in silver, which can explode at any time now.
So, yeah, a lot of people focus on supply, or they focus on inflation. But what your research has done, and what you've been doing with GATA for the last 12 years, is just the manipulation to the downside could actually cause the precious metals to explode to a fair market value.
Well, you nailed it. That's exactly what's happening, and it's a very exciting situation. And one thing we realize in doing so, the mainstream gold world and Planet Wall Street, as I call it, have all been working with the wrong supply-demand numbers, because they haven't accounted for the gold and silver using this price suppression scheme. And we knew 10 years ago what was going to occur. We probably have the best track record, certainly as good as anybody in the whole world, about what was to happen to gold and silver and why. We even stated so in January 31st, 2008, in a $264,000 full-page color ad in the Wall Street Journal, which people can check out at www.gata.org website. And we said, this is before the financial crisis. We said, as a result of this price suppression scheme, catastrophe and disaster are coming. Before it all happened, nobody paid any attention to us. And we also talked back then about $3,000 to $5,000 gold, when nothing has changed. That's where we're going.
Yeah, so you feel right now, without the pricing and quantitative easing and the bonds and everything that's going on, just the manipulation puts gold around $3,000?
No, I'm saying that's where the price I felt was going to have to go, is what we would say to clear the market. In other words, once the supply-demand, for the supply-demand numbers to fit together, because they're running out of supply, you're going to take a move up to $3,000 to $5,000 an ounce or so, somewhere around there, to slow down demand enough to meet supply. And of course, silver, you can pick a number on the upside.